Maven Log 1. It's finally begun. As expected, the sisters required a little trial before they would grant what I asked for. My trial begins in a human settlement, or rather a makeshift settlement, inside a rather large complex. The inhabitants were a rather odd bunch. They don't really respond to any of my questions, and they would almost always spout the same lines after a while. It's almost as if they're just regular NPCs in a video game or something. I guess the old ones just left them there so that I don't feel lonely in my trials. How very kind of them. Not wasting too much time with these NPCs, I went off and explored the complex even further, and looking at all these computer and written logs, it looks like the real humans found some kind of otherworldly object and were conducting experiments on it. And at the center of all this research is this giant crystal. At first I was apprehensive to even approach it, but the three sisters assured me that my trial will truly begin once I touch it. And so, putting my faith in all three of them, I touched that crystal without hesitation. Next thing I remember, I woke up in what looks like the remains of a garage. Walking up the stairs, I found basically the remains of some weird creatures, as well as a very intriguing, well, say graffiti there. What is the labyrinth? Is this some clue as to where I should go? With that first clue, I finally made my way outside. And boy, how the world has fallen. Trees everywhere, rubble, and the distant wailings of some weird tree creatures. I wonder, is this what the world would look like if any of the three sisters are offended in some way? So much destruction. One can only imagine how all of this went down when the apocalypse came. And looking at the school bus, I shudder at the thought of the fear that the children felt when all this came. I mean, looking through my scope and seeing those weird tree creatures, it must have been very, very harrowing seeing them kill countless people, as well as the sounds of terror that echoed around the city when the apocalypse came. After fighting through the city for a couple of hours, I ended up in what I believe is the remains of either a zoo or an aviary, judging by that dome-like ruin that I see in the distance. Walking further, I noticed a fog covering the entrance to the ruin, and almost immediately the three sisters spoke to me once again. They told me this will be my first real trial, so I braced myself for what is to come. So my first real trial was to defeat this Triad. Very well, I said to myself at the time, as I brought up my rifle and fired almost immediately. If it was just me against that creature, it would have been a little bit more manageable, despite the fact that its shock waves and roars were almost impossible to dodge. But those little creatures that were constantly swarming me, especially the ones that explode, now those are the ones that made the fight even tougher. I barely got out of that fight at the skin of my own teeth. I had used up most of my healing items, and I was near death, not gonna lie. But it's the results that matter, and in the end, I managed to beat that treant. Not too far from that arena, I stumbled upon a church, and cautiously I entered and found it almost empty. No chairs, no podium, no nothing. Just the same sight of those otherworldly trees clinging to the walls. Despite all that, this church is devoid of any kind of life, not even those weird tree creatures. That treant fight was far more tiring than I thought, since the second I sat down at the corner of a back room, I immediately fell asleep. Luckily, nothing came, and I'm still alive. That concludes my latest entry. Once I'm fully rested, I shall be continuing my journey through this forsaken city, and hopefully I'll be able to find this so-called labyrinth. May the sisters always guide me throughout this journey.